we still do work with beauty and skincare influencers, but we have come to understand, and Sephora has also underlined this and reinforced this, that working with the derm influencers is ultimately far more valuable for us. It's just longer term, especially as a brand that is built on working with the dermatologist community, is built on treating skin concerns and built on improving the health of the skin barrier. Having those many influencers has been incredibly important to us. And so we can't always put our finger on the number.
Welcome back to Med Creator 101. I'm Mimi Banks, founder of MB Social, and I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Portella, board-certified dermatologist, dermfluencer, and amazing podcast host.
Always good to be here.
Today, we're talking about the evolving relationship between skincare brands and medical professionals on social media. Dermatologists and skincare experts aren't just educators. They're trusted voices shaping how people approach their skin health. Skinfix is a brand that has taken a unique approach to working with medfluencers, building partnerships that go beyond traditional sponsorships to foster education, community, and real-world impact. Joining us today is Amy Gordinier, founder of Skinfix. Since launching the brand in 2014, Amy has pioneered the clean clinical skincare movement, bringing conversation around skin barrier health to the forefront at Sephora. With a background in beauty giants like L'Oreal and Jo Malone, she took her passion for science-backed skincare to a whole new level, developing high-performance formulas in collaboration with dermatologists to address real skin concerns. Amy, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. This is such a great podcast. I'm so excited to be joining you both.
There's a lot that our audience will love to learn from you about how influencers work with skincare brands, particularly Skinfix, but a lot of it will be applicable to a wide range of medical professionals who want to partner with high-quality brands in their industry. But before we jump into any of that, Amy, we like to do a little get-to-know-you type of game, and I'm usually the subject of these questions. So I'm excited to be able to turn that around and quiz you a little bit. They're easy questions, but just to get an idea of who you are and what you're like in real life. So are you ready for some questions?
I'm ready. Shoot.
All right. So the first question is Netflix binge or weekly episodes?
Oh, binge. Hate to say it. Many nights until 2 a.m. Yeah.
Burn a weekend and do it. Okay.
Yeah, if it's a good one, it's hard to turn it off.
It is. They do a great job on leaving you on a cliffhanger and then they're ready to satisfy it right away.
Totally.
Travel for adventure or travel for relaxation?
Relaxation. 50 plus, I think you kind of get beyond the adventure and into the relaxation. Post kids, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, just that all-inclusive, bring me my drink and...
Yeah, lay in the sun, get some vitamin D, sadly, but true.
With a lot of SPF, obviously.
Of course, with a hat and sun protective clothing, of course.
Absolutely, but it feels great. So cooking at home or ordering out?
Cooking at home. I love cooking. Oh, yeah. Did that surprise you, Dustin?
No, it's so easy to just order in. It's too easy, honestly, to just get the stuff. So it's good to have that intention to cook, be healthy. There's an art to it. So I think that's great.
I love it. I'm not a great cook, but it's my wind down, my stress release at night. I really love it.
What's your go-to recipe?
I do a lot of grass-fed steak, which isn't really a recipe. I do a lot of beef, grass-fed beef, and a lot of fish. We live in Nova Scotia. We get great seafood here, lobster, shellfish. Yeah, I have a repertoire. I think my kids are really tired of it, but it's the rotation.
Well, good. Well, hopefully that gives our audience a little flavor of who you are, and we're excited to dive into Skinfix as a brand and your approach to working with influencers.
I'm excited to talk about it. It's important.
You were one of the first, if I'm not wrong, about how you actually work with dermatologists. Can you tell us, let's start to set the scene about the different ways that Skinfix collaborates with dermatologists?
When I started the company in 2014, our initial products were focused on treating eczema. And so I knew I was not the expert in eczema. And it was really important for me to tap into the dermatologist community to understand, A, if they believed that my formulation had efficacy, and B, to really understand the concern that I was trying to formulate for. So from day one, we started attending dermatology conferences and sitting down and having meals and coffees with dermatologists to tell them about what we were doing. There was a bit of skepticism initially, I'll be honest, because we were also trying to do it with clean formulations. I like to say I was the first functional medical practitioner in skincare, sort of taking the best of Western medicine and clinical medicine and also the best of sort of what we have in the holistic space. But from the get-go, we were working with derms, and then we quickly created a scientific advisory board of 4 dermatologists that helped to really guide us in different areas, whether it be formulation. Clinical testing was a big one, really understanding the rigor with which we needed to test our formulations in order to have it be legitimate with the dermatology community. We ended up having some of our tests published, and then just really evolved into more collaborative partnerships around product development and around supporting our launches and helping us get the word out. So from day one, dermatologists have been absolutely critical and foundational to Skinfix.
And was this a unique positioning at the time? Were there other brands having this kind of collaboration?
No, I mean, if I'm honest, we really modeled ourselves after CeraVe. I mean, in a very small way compared to what the L'Oreal machine can obviously do, but we really saw ourselves as a sort of more premium Sephora clean version of a CeraVe initially. Tried to emulate a lot of what CeraVe did in terms of working with the dermatologist community, collaborating, even getting to know some of the residents as they were coming up through the ranks. So I think that was really kind of our gold star in terms of how to most effectively collaborate with the dermatologist community.
So as you started working with dermatologists, were you working with them on social very early, or did that evolve later with the company?
It evolved later with the social media, to be honest, Dustin. I mean, when we first launched the brand, it was 2014. There was Facebook and Snapchat, I think. I think Instagram was just really nascent and just sort of flat lays and a lot of lifestyle influencers. And then we had the explosion of makeup influencers on YouTube and eventually Instagram. And there weren't really skin influencers and there were no meta influencers really until COVID, I would say. I think that's sort of when medical professionals started taking to social media to talk about what was going on with COVID and then just started to expound on their area of expertise. And dermatologists were spending a lot of time talking about skincare and talking about the rise in skin concerns. And because we had done a lot of work with dermatologists for years, we were getting organically mentioned a lot during that time. And that's when our brand really exploded. I very much credit the rise of the Medi-influencer to the success of our brand. They came really hand in hand. So that was when it all kind of started for us.
Yeah, it's kind of that overnight success story that's years in the making.
Exactly.
You had put the building blocks in place if you were already partnering with them from 2014.
Yeah. And there was a sense of sort of authenticity in our relationships and credibility and deep personal relationships that our team had built in that time with the dermatologist community. And there was a deep respect that I think was mutual. And that's important. I think it's really important for brands to be committed to the dermatologist community and understand that derms are the experts in skin. And we are taking that knowledge and expertise and pulling it through in product formulations. But to really recognize that dermatologists are the experts, I think is important.
And how did you decide, or what was the criteria you were looking for when you sought out that dermatologist point of view, the dermatologist feedback? How did you know who to ask?
Well, initially, there was a woman in Canada who did a lot of work with CeraVe, actually, running ad boards and connecting brands to derms. And I somehow got introduced to her. I can't even remember how. She brought me to my first dermatologist in Toronto, who's a contact dermatologist, Dr. Sandy Skotnicki, because at the time I had just bought this company, which had one formula, and I wanted to know if this formula was something that a dermatologist would ever recommend. So Dr. Skotnicki looked at the formula. She loved the way it was balanced between humectants, emollients, and occlusives. She loved the ingredients in it. There was one ingredient that she didn't like, however, balsam tolu, which is a sap from the balsam tree that can be highly allergenistic. So she said that has to come out. But my instinct was if I'm going to treat eczema, I absolutely need to do this in a credible way. And just because the product's clean, it needs to be clinically viable. So I sought out this woman, Roxanne Chabot, who connected me to Dr. Sandy Skotnicki. And also Dr. Skutnik, he said to me, listen, I would never recommend this to my patients without any sort of clinical validity. So we did our first study in her office with 10 patients and then took that to a larger study. So that just kind of set me on the way, really, to develop and work alongside dermatologists.
So you laid the groundwork, and it's, I think, really helpful to understand how you started in with dermatologists, making those connections, and then growing the relationship with additional dermatologists. As a company, what was the strategy as you decided to pivot into the social media side when you started working with influencers in skincare and derm influencers? For large companies, sometimes those transitions are hard. How did that conversation go internally and then start to identify who you wanted to work with?
Yeah, it's a great question. For us, we were so excited to see the sort of rise of the Medi influencer because we're a serious skincare brand. We're doing a lot of hard work to formulate a certain way and then to rigorously clinically test with instrumentation and derm evaluation. Try not to rely on consumer perception claims. And it's very hard to educate people about the importance of that. So when Medi influencers started to really grow, for us, it was just a no-brainer that it was going to be foundational to our strategy and that the majority of influencers we were going to work with were going to be dermatologists and some estheticians and even some functional practitioners, but primarily dermatologists to help spread the word about our brand and what we stood for and how we formulated and how we tested and why it was important and the results we were getting and why it was critical that those results were being evaluated by Visias and corneometers and derm evaluation and not just someone's opinion. So it was critical for us strategically just to work with dermatologists, which was great. And then in terms of choosing them, it's really, as you'll know, dermatologists that are able to present complicated information and engaging, digestible, fun formats and that are lovable and, and can create an emotional connection are fantastic. Science can be dry. And I think that's one of the things that our brand is sort of trying to overcome is that we're so sciencey that sometimes we're not as emotionally connected to the customer as we'd like to be. So terms that can really build that emotional connection are who we look for and can really explain the science in very straightforward terms and also have a point of view, who aren't afraid to say they don't like this or that about one of our formulas. We embrace that. We listen to that. We also want really credible voices.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you've developed something called the Skinfix Derm Crew. Tell us about that and the different tiers and everything. Like, what is the Skinfix Derm Crew?
The Skinfix Derm Crew is a group of, I think it's 950 residents that every year we consummate this group of folks who are derm residents. And the idea really is to create a very collaborative partnership. And so we have different tiers depending on derm residents are really busy, depending on what they have time for and what they're willing to sort of get involved in. So tier one is really, we have some virtual educational seminars where we bring in some amazing derms to talk to them about different topics. So Dr. Leo will come and speak about eczema or about psoriasis. And Dr. Kavita Marwala came and talked about building a career in derm. And Dr. Ellen Marmer came and talked about how to sell product in the front of your office. And so just really kind of educational topics. Our social media team has talked to the derm influencers about how to create content. We've talked to them about how to create a product from start to finish if eventually they'd like to have a product line. So the first tier is sort of educational. They can test new products. They can be part of community events that we host. Tier two is just getting a little bit more involved. So in terms of social content and product launch support, that sort of encompasses tier two. And then tier three are the folks that really want to get involved. And they are welcome into the actual product development process where they can advise on some of the ingredients and the formulations and really start to test products as they're being developed and also get involved with Sephora. So we do a lot of in-store events with our derm crew, and that's tier three. So that's kind of how over the 3 years we've been doing this, we've taken feedback from the derm residents, and that's how they wanted to construct and build it. And for us, we get to know these derms early on. We get to watch them kind of grow in their practice, but also grow in their influencer space if that's something they're interested in. And it's just a great way to build relationships and community.
Tier three almost sounds like a mini internship, getting behind the scenes, working with the brand on product formulation. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, in the end of the day, it makes a lot of sense for dermatologists to have a skincare brand. It does. And so if we can facilitate, some of those folks who aspire to do that and we can help them in any way, we'd love to do that. The more, the merrier.
And how do the residents get to join it? Is it an application process? What does that look like?
It is an application process. Initially, we really leveraged Kavita Marawala, who's on our board, she helps derms prepare for the boards. And we leveraged that group of folks. And most of the derm residents early on came through Kavita and her group, and she helped us launch it. And now it's very much word of mouth, and it's an application process. And our social team just sort of has a look, and we try to get a range of derms. So it's not just folks that aspire to be Medi influencers. It's also other derms that have interest in other areas that we can collaborate with them on. So it's growing every year and we love it.
That's incredible. And are they then creating content for you and for the social channels too?
Absolutely. And they're very generous with their content. We get a lot of organic love, and we get love from even those that have sort of moved out of the resident program and continue to support the brand. And then we end up doing other paid partnerships with those folks. And it's really a nice ecosystem.
That's great. And this is actually something that Dustin and I talk about a lot. It's about forging those relationships, that it's not something short term, that there's tremendous long-term benefits to having that kind of relationship and thinking about long-term.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so much that we as a brand learn. A lot of times people ask me where we come up with some of our product ideas, and 9 times out of 10, it's from attending derm conferences and having conversations with dermatologists. I had a really good conversation with Marina Torregano at an event that we were at in May. Dustin, you were there, the one in Newport, and I was picking her brain about vitamin C's, and we ended up developing a vitamin C based on her feedback and based on her thoughts. So I learned so much just listening to some of the conditions, skin concerns and conditions that you all are talking about on podium, and some of the testing that's being done, some of the prescription medications that are being developed, and what the sort of active pharmaceutical ingredient is. And then how do I find a way to kind of leverage that technology in an OTC product? So we learned so much from our derm partners. I've known Mamina for years as well. And the more that you build those relationships and you can really sit down and have heart-to-heart conversations about things, the more you both get out of it, I think.
She's wonderful.
Yeah, she's incredible. I love her sort of holistic approach as well. I mean, she's just brilliant.
So you've talked about how you identify derms that you want to work with on social media. Of course, you have the derm crew and you do the paid partnerships. You want to look for people that are good at distilling that scientific information, creating an emotional attachment to the brand. What kind of things are red flags for you as a brand where you'll say, we probably don't want to work with this person, and we don't have to name names or anything, but what are some things that a brand, you can speak generally, sees as things to be cautious about when choosing who they work with on social media?
That's such a good question. I think credibility and a strong point of view are so important. And if someone is working with a lot of different brands and working with brands that maybe don't seem aligned with our brand, that's a bit of a red flag for us. We really feel it's important for dermatologists to stand for certain things. And we might not always agree with those things, but it's just really important for us that if somebody really believes that product should be fragrance free, that even if they're reviewing a product that has fragrance, they're mentioning that that's something they don't like about the product. So it's really about credibility and not working with kind of every single brand that comes along. I'm sure it's hard to turn brands down. I mean, it's a great way to supplement an income, but I think it's just super important for us as a brand that there's a strong point of view and that there are some boundaries around what types of brands they might work with and not.
I think that's very good advice, and it's applicable to anybody in the medical space who's working with brands, whether it's skincare or otherwise. I've certainly seen television commercials or online influencers who are working with a product, and I'm like, really? Like, these are like gas station pills or something, just to be facetious a little bit. But you do have to be selective. And Mimi can probably speak to this because we work together. We probably turn down more offers than we accept. And that's part of maintaining that credibility and finding things that we're aligned with and it's good to understand for people interested in working with brands that brands also have values that they want to align with and how you identify those.
And I think what comes inherent with a medical professional is that MD is that you trust your physician, your medical professional, your practitioner, who you're seeing with the products that they're recommending. And so, at least from where Dustin and I sit, we spend time really evaluating, do you like this product? Do you believe in it? Does it work? Do you agree with the ingredients and everything that it stands for before partnering with anybody because of that credibility?
So important. And I'm sure it's hard, especially when young derms are just getting started, to say no to a partnership is not easy. It's really not easy to do. And or just saying to the brand, hey, listen, I like this, this, and this about this product. I don't like this. And I'm going to say that. And if the brand's okay with that, I think that's a different discussion. But credibility is so important.
But I think that's what you're saying about credibility and establishing your point of view. What do you believe in? What do you think works? What is your angle? What expertise do you have? And I think that's part of, as you're going through, maybe it's education, experience, fellowship, internships, or even in practice, that your point of view is evolving, especially as new ingredients, technologies come out, that your point of view will probably evolve that much more.
Absolutely. And that's okay too. I think people are allowed to change their mind over time too. And that's something else that I also respect, as people get more information or there's more clinical evidence or they change their mind on something based on what they've seen in practice. I love to hear that too.
One thing that I know many people will be curious about, including myself, is as a brand, when you partner with dermatologists or influencers, as a brand, how do you monitor your return on investment? How do you know when a partnership is successful? Because there's certainly the metric of, did it drive sales because we had a unique link that we could see people clicked on, versus campaigns that maybe primarily served as brand awareness and putting it in the mind of people, even if it doesn't lead to immediate purchases. How do you evaluate that as a brand to identify when a campaign has been successful?
That's a really good question, Dustin. And the answer is as Mimi will know, it's very hard to do. The industry uses a metric called EMV, which is created by this company called Tribe Dynamics, that we think is more and more maybe not necessarily the right metric in terms of the ROI. I think what's really interesting, if I can be totally transparent, is a couple of years ago, our investor ran an ROI analysis on our derm influencer content versus our traditional skincare influencer content. And on the face of it, if you just looked at EMV, the skin influencer content, the beauty lifestyle influencer content was more successful. And I argued vehemently that working with many influencers was a longer and more important and more foundational effort for us as a brand. And we still do work with beauty and skincare influencers, but we have come to understand, and Sephora has also underlined this and reinforced this, that working with the derm influencers is ultimately far more valuable for us. It's just longer term, especially as a brand that is built on working with the dermatologist community, is built on treating skin concerns and built on improving the health of the skin barrier. Having those many influencers has been incredibly important to us. And so we can't always put our finger on the number. A lot of it is just kind of a belief that it's a slightly longer term play for us, but it's foundational for us. So it's hard if you're just looking for a straight ROI. Sure, there are times when a derm influencer has posted about us where we've seen a spike in sales that week. For sure, that has happened. But it's really more of kind of a bubbling, and it's a longer term credibility play for a brand. If a brand thinks that they're going to have one or two derm influencers here and there talk about them, I don't know that that's going to really make an impact. I think if you're a brand that aligns yourself with the dermatology community, which I think more and more brands want to and need to and should do, because it's really the most credible voice in skincare, you've got to kind of have a constant drumbeat. You've got to be working with derms at all different levels of followers. And to answer your question, it's not an easy thing to do to derive that ROI. And I don't know, Mimi, do you have a good way of assessing?
I think that you explained it perfectly. I think that sometimes it's not obvious. I think sometimes that you can look at any influencer, their organic content performs a certain way. You look for patterns, you look for trends. The minute it says sponsored or an ad, the engagement could drop or it could spike because they have boosted the post. I think it depends on the brief. It depends on the dermfluencer or medfluencer's feed if they're constantly talking in a certain way and the brand has briefed them to do their natural style, or they have to hit so many points that it feels disingenuous. I think that it's important for a brand to understand the way that you understand about the long-term gain versus the short-term vanity metrics, what the implications are. Because for you, the core and the foundation is that dermatology credibility. And so that's fundamental to your DNA. Therefore, it has to be there. And maybe you can refine briefs, find stronger content creators or different medical professionals that resonate with your audience. But it's going to be a constant test and learn, I think.
Totally. And I mean, for brand owners, if any are listening, who are interested in building brands and eventually selling them, I will tell you that our brand is constantly cited as one that has long-standing, authentic relationships with the dermatology community that is incredibly valuable to those companies that are really looking for a dermocosmetic brand, a true dermocosmetic brand, which we are. And so that takes time. I mean, it's been 12 years that I've been working with the dermatology community. It's been, a lot of time, a lot of money, but it's super valuable. It's incredibly important. And it's not a sort of a trendy situation. You've got to really understand this has got to be foundational to your brand. And listen, I mean, brands that are in the space that are working with derms are really hot right now. That's why everybody wants to do it. Stick with it. It's important that you've got authentic, really credible, longstanding relationships with dermatologists if that's the position you want to take with your brand.
I think that's good for other brands to hear as well, because it's a long-term strategy that you've employed and you've seen the results of that, even though it may not be imminently apparent right after a campaign. But I would also agree with you that your brand has positioned itself very well with the dermatology community, where those organic and authentic recommendations come outside of the paid partnerships. And you're at the meetings where derms are there discussing scientific topics that are coming up in eczema, in skincare. You're in the right places, you're forming the right relationships, and you have seen the value in that as a brand.
Yeah, I mean, I brought our Sephora merchant team to Science of Skincare this year, and they were blown away. They were like, this is gold. We just launched an exosome product. That's because of derm conferences and hearing about exosomes for years and seeing all the clinical results post-procedure and going and trying to find a vegan exosome. And that's how we're on the cutting edge all the time, is because of the derm conferences. I mean, I'm giving my secrets away, but the Sephora merchants were blown away at the level of content and just the robustness, and also the brands that were showing there that had booths there that were interesting to them that they had never seen or heard before. So it's great.
Totally. And what's interesting here too is that from a dermfluencer, Dustin and I also talk about this, is the importance of networking, the importance of going to conferences, to going to meetings, meeting the brands, getting to know people, discovering new brands, seeing what you like, seeing what the landscape is like, and developing those relationships.
Absolutely. I would also say to med influencers, a great conference to attend is Sephora, which is the Sephora brand conference that's open to the public. And it's typically in New York, sometimes in LA, they move it around, but it's a whole, 3 or 4 floors full of Sephora brands, and they're all there, and all the founders are there, the marketing teams are there. So if you're a derm resident and you want to kind of create bonds and talk about partnerships with brands, that's a great place to go. Is some of the beauty conferences. I know you don't have tons of time, and so I understand and appreciate you can't travel around at conferences all the time, but those are interesting too.
Yeah, I've never actually heard of that conference, so we'll have to put that on the calendar. It's a great place to go network, it sounds like.
Absolutely. It's also fun to get great samples too.
Amy, you are a wealth of knowledge, dropping all these gems.
I think, as a brand, I would highly recommend, if you're a clinical skincare brand, dermatology conferences are a great place to really get good information. If you're a Medi influencer, you guys are in demand. You're in demand. Know your worth. If you're interested in becoming an influencer like Dustin, his content's phenomenal. I'm sure you guys already do this, but watch those influencers that are creating great content and that are just lovable personalities that people want to follow. And here you're off to the races. There's so much opportunity, and work with someone like Mimi that can help you navigate.
Yeah, it takes a lot of people to really learn the landscape, and there's a wealth of free resources out there. We really believe that more medical professionals need to be a part of that conversation so that people get accurate information, because the conversations are going to happen whether, those that are knowledgeable in them participate or not. So we want to make sure people are getting good information.
100%. I welcome it. As a client, as a human being, I get so much valuable information on social media from doctors who have taken their time and energy to explain things. I've learned a lot about a lot of different things. And so carry on. It's wonderful. Democratization of medical knowledge and care is what we need.
Well, Amy, it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast, and I look forward to seeing you at conferences this year. It's always fun to catch up and see what the brand is up to, and just to spend time with you personally and your team, which is really lovely. So,
ditto. Love seeing you too, Dustin and Mimi. I feel like we're on the same conference route, which is wonderful. Same circuit. Thank you so much for having me on. This is great.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Med Creator 101 podcast, where we talk to Amy Gordinier, who is the founder of Skinfix. If you are interested in working with brands as a medical professional, this episode contained a wealth of knowledge to understand what brands are looking for in the influencer space, the things that you should do to maintain your authenticity as an influencer, and maybe some things to avoid, like taking every brand deal that comes your way or not having firm principles that you live by on social media. If you guys are interested in the Derm Squad with Skinfix, you can reach out to them on social media. We'll have links to Skinfix as well as the Med Creator podcast in the show notes. And if you're joining us, make sure to leave us a 5-star review and share this podcast with your friends. We'll see you on the next episode.